Hello and welcome to the Aquarius Podcast. I'm your host, Randy Reed. This episode of the Aquarius Podcast is sponsored by OASE. Now, before we get into the interview, I want to tell you about a recent bout of green water I had in my fish room. Currently, 2 of my 20 highs house a pair of beautiful black angelfish with gorgeous blue leopard spotting on the fins. Now, being that my main goal in the fish room is breeding, these particular tanks barely had any plants in them. After a month or 2 of being placed in these tanks, I experienced an explosion of green water, which I can only attribute to an imbalance in light and nutrients. Now, it just so happened that OASE sent me a Cleartronic UV sterilizer to try out beforehand. I seriously didn't even think that I was going to use this thing. But, as it turns out, this is exactly what I needed at the time. I hooked this sterilizer up to an OASE OptiMax pump and let it do its UV sterilizer thing. Within a few days, the water in the first tank was back to being crystal clear. Rinse and repeat on the next tank, and the story's over. Since then, I've put potted crypts and pothos in both tanks to help suck up those extra nutrients in the water. So if you're looking for a long or short-term solution to green water, go check out the Cleartronic UV sterilizer. Now, on to the interview. Today's date is Monday, June 17th, 2019. My guest today is John Pini. John is a competitive aquascaper and a member of the Aquascapers Collective and the Chicago Aquatic Plant Society. John, welcome to the Aquarius Podcast.
Thanks, Randy.
Well, thank you very much for coming on this Monday evening. Let's go ahead and jump right into it, John. Who is John Pini, and how did you get your start in aquariums?
Yeah, so I actually, I think unlike a lot of people, I didn't have any past experience in my childhood growing up with aquarists or friends that kept aquariums, but I did have one cousin that had a giant South American arowana biotope built into his wall, and that was the coolest thing. Whenever I'd go over his house, I'd run to go check out his tank. And so I guess I always had some sort of good memories with aquariums, but I actually didn't become an aquarist myself until after graduating college in 2014. I stumbled across some competitive aquascapes online. In particular, there's the aquascape called the Tidal Firmament, and I believe it was in 2011. Yep, 2011, rank 14. If you want to look it up, it's called The Firmament by Chow Wing Ki, and it's an Iwagumi aquascape, sort of a mountain scene, and that thing just grabbed a hold of me, and I thought, man, I'm kind of in a new stage of life. I'm done with my studies. I have a home. My wife and I just moved in together, and I decided I want to try and make something like that. So in 2014, set up my first planted tank. I was able to be successful growing plants with a DIY CO2 system, and had some good experiences, and then I moved forward from there. So I've really only been in Aquarius for about 5 years here.
Wow, yeah. So within 5 years, I mean, your name is fairly well recognized, I would say, in the U.S. aquascaping, and I would assume to some extent kind of on an international level, and just doing a quick Google search to make sure that I had your Instagram page up just for this interview so I can have some reference points. You've got an article from, let's see here, 2016. Let's scroll back up to the top, folks. Great for audio interviews. Yeah, November 30th, 2016. So 2 years after you got into the hobby, you have a title in Reef to Rainforest Media called The Mind-Bending Nano Aquascape of John Pini. And within 2 years, man, that's pretty damn impressive.
Thanks. Yeah, that was actually my second competitive aquascape. So I joined the year before. I entered the AGA aquascaping competition at the Aquatic Experience, and I went in and I put my best effort forward, and I got beat down. I didn't rank or anything like that. And at that point, I had a decision to make, like, am I going to get better, or am I just going to be discouraged? And I chose the former, thankfully.
Yeah, nice.
I was able to kind of put any sort of, you have, when you try really hard at something and it doesn't work out, you get discouraged or you get more motivation. So, and I think part of that is a conscious choice too. So I took the motivation from that, and then the next year I returned and gave it my all again. this time with some more experience, and was able to walk away with the win in that competition. So that was like my first, I should say, successful goal met in the competitive aquascaping, and yeah, moved forward from there. So I've been doing mostly the focusing on the international contests, though I do the live ones here and there too. They're two different, very different situations that kind of require different tactics, and um,
Before we
yeah, they're
jump into those
both
real quick,
great.
John, I want to understand a little bit more about your backstory. And what I'm getting at
Sure.
is, so you get into this in 2014, so 5 years ago. You're done with college, you're a young professional, and the only real impression that you've had of fish tanks was just this awesome South American tank that your cousin had. But so there isn't that strong aquatic, Aquarius roots. What
Yeah.
other hobbies or what other tendencies do you have that you think are like, okay, that makes sense? Yeah, he's into carnivorous plants, or he's into gardening, or he's very artistic. Or do you have any of those other kind of attributes or hobbies?
Yeah. So I'm a bit of a I'm a bit of a mess when it comes to hobbies. I tend to get into too many different things. But growing up, mostly athletics and combat sports. So I played football, lacrosse, and then a variety of different martial arts that I trained in. Everything from American boxing to Brazilian jiu-jitsu, but
So not pointing me to aquascaping yet,
not
but
pointing to aquascape. No. But the thing that I think really drew me to it is so much of my time spent outside of my studies or my work had been sort of in aggressive pursuits in terms of, like I said, they're combat sports, things like that. And I'm a very peaceful person, actually. So
when I'm not
not,
ripping fools' heads off.
no, but yeah, no, I really wanted to find something that could be like a relaxing sort of thing. And I'd never been a gardener. I'd never kept, plants of any sort or aquariums really. Um, but I always loved nature. And ever since I was little, I think it's something that's in my family, in my genetics. My dad, he's really into landscaping. He can tell you every kind of tree there is. And my mother would, throw us in a car, me and my siblings when we were younger, and we'd just take off and drive to Idaho, and mostly to see the natural landscapes that the U.S. has to offer. And so I always had a really deep love for growing things and for the natural world. And I think, living in Chicago, or I should say in the suburbs of Chicago, there's really not much here. You have to get out and go find it. So the idea that I could bring a piece of nature into my home really spoke to me. And I think that aquascape I mentioned before, the firmament in particular, the reason why it stood out to me, it does sort of represent, at least its initial impression, is more of a terrestrial landscape, kind of a mountain range sort of thing. And it reminded me of what I saw when we would go on these trips out west. And as somebody who didn't have a background in aquatics before, I think it, the terrestrial aquascapes, or the diorama aquascapes that a lot of people will describe them as, get a lot of hate. But I think it was a really good way for the door to be open to somebody who didn't necessarily have a background or an appreciation for the aquatic world. It was a way for me to connect with it and understand what aquascaping was about. And then now, 5 years later, I do tend to lean more towards enjoying the traditional nature aquarium styles, or the more aquatic looking environments.
Yeah, I can definitely appreciate that. And what's funny is maybe you had a little bit of this in yourself, but my dad, growing up, would always take me to nurseries, and we had a sizable piece of land in Northern California, so we were always planting trees and shrubs and just every sort of plant that he would find that he was interested in. So it's very eclectic in terms of the plant collection. And to this day, you know, the property looks very, very gorgeous. I mean, there's huge olive trees and apricot trees and all sorts of fruit trees. But I would dread going to the nursery. I hated it as a kid. It was terrible. You know, it's not just like the Home Depot or Lowe's nursery. It was all of the, you know, any nursery, anywhere where they sold plants and trees and all that stuff we were always going to. And now I find some of my favorite stores in this general area. If you're ever in the Seattle area, you go to a store called Molbach's. That's one of our really nice nursery stores, a little bit more expensive, but a wonderful selection. And also Flower World that has these beautiful outdoor fountains with chickens and geese and massive greenhouses. They've got a couple ponds inside with red ear sliders, and I mean, it's just
that's awesome.
It's just such a cool place to go to. And I dreaded going there as a kid, but now I find myself in yard work. Like, I love doing yard work now.
Yep.
But these are things where, you know, they're an escape from your laptop, they're an escape from your computer, and I realize that you're off work, and I'm you know, to do this podcast, I'm putting you back in front of a computer and not in front of a piece of nature. But yeah, it's funny how, you know, you've got kind of this rebellion where, you know, you don't want to do what your parents did, or you don't want to do what you were brought up around, at least for me. And now it's something that I really enjoy doing. And hopefully I've said this before with the hobby in general, but hopefully I can find that balance where maybe there's a couple Saturdays where I don't take my sons to go to the nursery, so I don't burn them out on it, but we still kind of have this strong appreciation, and they do like going and seeing the plants and all these other various things.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think the you have to have some sort of human connection in whatever sort of hobby you have, and whether that's something in appreciation of nature or athletics or whatever, you have to have that. And I think, you know, we've talked a bit about how I got into the hobby and you know, moving forward pretty quickly with the competitive aquascaping, but I wouldn't have gotten, you know, probably past the first year if I didn't have a community and connect with other people who had more knowledge, had more wisdom, more experience in this art form or in this gardening, this specific type of gardening, because it's a very unique thing. You know, it's not like you know, when you're gardening terrestrial plants or a flower garden where there's tons of people everywhere who know how to do it. It's a pretty niche sort of thing. So I actually pretty early on intentionally sought out people who could teach me, because that's the quickest way to learn anything is, you know, human beings are communal beings. We teach each other. And my local fish store was bringing in Balin Shaw from the AGA to do a demonstration. And I met Balin there, and we kind of connected, and he taught me, you know, how to grow plants basically, and the basics of, you know, the foundations of aquascaping. He encouraged me to get into the contest. So I really think, you know, sort of like you mentioned, there's a balance with anything and with our interests. I think the focus ultimately needs to be around community and not necessarily the specific art form or the specific endeavor. It's about the community that's around it, and that's what kind of gives something longevity, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. And so, what are the Aquascapers collective in particular? When does that factor in?
So that is a more recent thing. We actually the aquascape that you mentioned, the one that was in the magazine, I believe that was 2016. Yep, yeah, 2016. There were some competitive aquascapers coming to the Aquatic Experience competition that year, traveling pretty far. It included Hip Hong, Corey Hopkins, Sean McBride, Dennis Wong. Dennis is not from the U.S., but he came along with them, and they came under Art Camiso as well, and they came under the team name the Aquascapers Collective. And these were people who I had seen their YouTube videos and been following online, and I got so excited because I was going to be going up against people who, you know, I aspired to sort of be like, or not necessarily be like, but to get to their level of expertise in aquascaping. So they showed up and they had won the large tank category. I'd won the nano. We talked, kind of met each other, and a few years later, um, we had a few other interactions. We actually went on a trip together to go see Floresta Submersas in Portugal in Lisbon, and then also to Aquaflora
And for
in the
those that
Netherlands.
don't know, and to make sure that I know, the Floresta, what did you call it? That's the Amano.
Floresta Submersas.
Yeah, that's isn't that the Amano display in Portugal?
It is.
Okay.
It is. Yeah, it's breathtaking. It's awesome.
And
Um,
do you know roughly how large that is? Because it's fairly massive, right?
it is. I don't know, and I apologize about that. But I will say,
It's like what you would expect to see kind of as you're walking into a building at like a SeaWorld, right? Like it's just a massive. It's got to be
yes.
pushing. It's got to be pushing 2,000 gallons at least, right? It's huge.
Oh yeah, yeah. I wonder if I can look it up pretty quick. But I mean,
Yeah, totally.
it wraps around. It basically wraps around three sides of a room.
Is that in Lisbon or is that Porto?
It is
or...
Lisbon.
Okay, yeah, that's
Yep,
where
it's at the Oceanario in Lisbon.
See, some of my wife's family lives in Lisbon, so
Oh, you got to go.
Oh yeah, for sure, for sure.
Yeah, there was a rumor going around, and maybe the rumor had some origins of truth that they were going to be taking it down, and so that's what kind of spurred this trip. Is we thought it was going to be taken down, so we all sort of gathered together and went to go see it. And then when we got there, they said, "Oh yeah, we're going to keep it up indefinitely, or at least for the time being. They didn't have an end date."
And so where is that? Is that like at like a natural museum or like a Portuguese aquarium? Like where is that actually set up?
it's at an aquarium that primarily features saltwater fish and reefs. It's like I don't know what to. We have the Shed Aquarium here in Chicago. It's smaller than that, but it's similar to that. And then they have one sort of exhibit dedicated to Amano's work, which is the Floresta Submersas.
That is interesting that a Japanese, kind of pioneer aquascaper would have this amazing work, and it would be in Portugal. I mean, not that Portugal is a bad place, but I'm sure there's a whole, 17 episode podcast series just around how that thing ended up in Portugal and the creation of it. But that's just kind of fascinating, like this global connection, how it played out.
Yeah, they actually two of the staff members from ADA from Japan moved there permanently just to take care of it.
Wow.
Yeah,
That is straight dedication.
Yes, that's how serious they are about it, and they were there when we visited. So that was something I didn't know before going. That really was sort of amazing to me, But yeah, so we went on that trip together, and during this time, these small events, we started dreaming up, how can we unite the aquascapers in the U.S. because the U.S. has not been historically seen as a great competitive aquascaping origin. Certainly, there are people, very notable people, and I would say the American forefathers of aquascaping. The Senskis, Luis Navarro, Jeff Miotke, and some people before. That were involved, but there wasn't really a sense of consistency or a large team for a little bit for quite a while in the U.S. But there's a group of us that were very passionate about it, so we wanted to see what we could do to change that and to elevate competitive aquascaping in the United States. So we actually opened up with the North American APL group, which was the aquatic plant layout group. It was very, very loosely structured, and it was just to get together everybody who was entering contests. And in that first year, we had a great participation, more so than we'd had in the last probably 10 years. And then once we had that kind of trial run year, we developed the Aquascapers Collective and sort of tried to iron out some of the wrinkles that we had the first time around, and we're continuing to improve the group, but we've actually only been around for two years, so it's a fairly new thing.
I will say by branding it and naming it the Aquascapers Collective as opposed to the Plant Layout Team or group, that is
Yes.
a much stronger name. Like I'm not, I don't want to poo poo on that naming process, but
Yes.
what was it, North American Plant Layout Group?
Yeah, that was the first. I don't know if it was really that first group was more of just really a Facebook page.
Okay.
And the Aquascapers Collective is more than a Facebook page now. That is still the platform that we primarily use. But yes, it's definitely a better name. In fact, it wasn't even a name that was in the running, but everybody kind of looked back and said, "Hey, that was kind of a catchy name. We should just stick with it." So those guys that I had met at that first contest and gotten to know, over the next year and a half, sort of asked me to help them found the group and keep it on track and within their vision, and I've been doing that ever since. So, like I said, it's pretty new, but we've been really successful already. I mean, last year we had two Americans, Hip Hong and Stephen Chong. Stephen is also part of the Tokyo Aquascapers Union and sort of made his way in that group. But we had two Americans in the top 7 of the IAPLC, which had never happened before.
That's pretty awesome. Yeah, and so I would say, to not beat the dead horse, but the Aquascapers Collective, I mean, that name just invokes like, whoa, what is that about? And actually, the way you and I got connected was Aquatic Experience. So again, people listening to this show, I've brought that up like 30 times now because I've met so many people from that one event, and you being one of them. Miyake and I, we were talking, and I think I was in a group with some other Aquascapers after the awards ceremony, and his team's Large Tank won. And so we were talking, and he had said he listened to the podcast, all this good stuff. And he's like, "Oh, do you know John Pini?" And I'm like, "No, I don't know him." He's like, "Oh, I got to bring you over." And people know I'm not super strong into aquascaping, but you and I met through that, and he had mentioned something about Aquascapers Collective, and I'm like, "Man, that name just sounds like Illuminati, like legit. Like what is going on with the Aquascapers Collective?" And that just sounds like something I want to be a part of.
Yeah, definitely. So the whole concept is that it's a very simple group. We don't want to get distracted, and not that to say that it would never change. It is a collective, so there's a lot of opinions in the group, but currently it's just a group of aquascapers held by certain ideals. So we have two platforms. There's the Aquascapers Collective Lodge, which is one Facebook page, and essentially anybody can be a part of that as long as the topics on the page revolve around aquascaping, layouts, fish choices for your layouts. The key is to keep it focused on aquascaping. And then we have a second part of the group, which has a more scary name, but that's the Aquascapers Collective Crucible.
What is going on here with your guys' names? I love it.
I don't.
You guys you're having too much fun with this.
It's basically the group where you take your gloves off and go to war with each other. I mean, it's basically reserved for people who are entering the international or national contests regularly and with the sort of drive to try to continuously improve. So it is a smaller group. It's also a group where, if let's say you don't want to do competition for a year, you don't have to get kicked out of the group. You just leave the Crucible and you hang out with TAC. You're still a Aquascapers Collective member in the lodge, and you still know everybody. So it's primarily a group just to unite the Aquascapers of the U.S. We're not even an official organization, but because we're trying to maintain people's freedom to kind of do what they want and expend their resources how they want. But it's definitely a united effort, and we've seen awesome results from it. I mean, aside from the two that ranked in the top 7, we've had multiple people in the top 100 every year, which is a winnings work ranking. In the IAPLC, we've had people with winning ranks in some of the other international competitions. I actually achieved my first winning rank in international competition last year in the AGA contest for the 2018 year in the 28 to 60 liter category. I took third place with a nano tank there. So it's really been an awesome place for people to meet their goals, to learn more quickly than they would on their own. And I would say, honestly, the biggest benefit of it is just the community. Certainly, we have ways that we critique each other and kind of processes that we suggest to people on how they should go about creating their layouts and stuff. But just the fact that you can go to one place and start to get to know all the other people across the country, and in Canada, we're actually a group consisting of all of North America. Just that you can go to this place and meet these people and get ideas and see how they approach their work is, I think, the biggest benefit of the group.
So two questions would be, one, so the Aquascapers Crucible, that's going to be a place where, what is it, like steel sharpens steel or whatever that saying is. I mean, it's going to be a brutal feedback, brutal constructive criticism. I assume there's no like, hey, John's t-shirt sucks today, I'm just going to tear him down just because. It's no, like, you're going to compete against these guys from Thailand and China and Indonesia that are just monsters in aquascaping, that just pull things out of, you know, Pan's Labyrinth or like whatever crazy, you know, aquascape design that's in their head. And so you're trying to step up to their level. So we're going to be brutally freaking honest, and we're going to tell you what we think is great with this and what we think is not working. You know, check your feelings at the door if you're going to come into this and share your stuff. Yes,
definitely. It's I mean, for a lot of people, I think it takes getting used to. For me, I think my background in some of the athletics and the combat sports I had, it was a little bit easier for me to take criticism for what it is. And you know, not to make it sound all harsh, it is still a place where we're ultimately having fun. You know, I think for some people, the draw to aquascaping is just to have a nice planted tank and to collect plants and to, you know, create something that looks awesome to them in their eyes. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. In fact, we love that, and that's why we have the Aquascapers Collective Lodge too, is because we want to be, you know, in close community with the people who are doing that. And certainly, I even set up tanks. I think most of us do who are into the competitive aquascaping. We have other tanks that look nothing like what we would submit to contests just because we enjoy it. But the Crucible is, you know, to loosely explain the process, we do start with asking, what is your goal? What is your intention and your inspiration? So we try to be as understanding of where the other person is coming from as possible. But then, yes, we do get brutally honest with, hey, this is how this comes off to me, because ultimately this layout's going to go before a judge, and they're not going to have you're not going to have the opportunity to tell them where you're coming from or what your inspiration is. You have to present it as objectively as possible within your layout. You have to communicate it through the layout.
Is there? Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, is there a concern with groupthink though? Like, how do you guys combat groupthink and, you know, kind of conforming or designing around certain principles that might end up becoming known as, oh, that's the USA Aquascaper collective style right there. Like, that's,
yeah.
Like, and this is also subjective. At least I think it's subjective. But then reading some like judge comments on some aquascaping, like that you'll see in various like say in Amazonas in particular, they'll kind of go over some aquascaping competitions with judges' comments, and maybe even the judges, they'll also have a predefined notion of what an aquascape should look like. So yeah, I guess I'm kind of making that a multi-layered question there. Like, how do you combat groupthink? But then at the same time, is that groupthink okay because that's what the judges want to see, and we're just kind of working towards that expectation?
Yeah, a few different responses there. One, the notion of groupthink. Certainly, if everybody's conforming to the same sort of style, I don't necessarily see that as a positive. But I think it can be successfully avoided if you promote the right values within the group. Let me see if I can explain it. If you if you promote the idea of come up with your own individual story and your own inspiration and have a clear idea in your mind what you want to present and then work towards that goal, that's different than saying, hey, this is how you aquascape to win a competition. And we try to stick to the first way. There's a, and I guess that idea of story is a little bit
Well,
maybe not
I mean, do you feel like you're
intuitive.
kind of a Hans Christian Andersen, where you're like, I'm gonna create this fantasy tale in my head. I'm gonna make this, scene in my mind, that I think, is gonna look good, and I'm going to express this story behind this slice of nature or this slice of avatar fantasy, if you will, in an aquarium.
Yeah, I think there's sometimes it is a scene or like, hey, I want to produce a forest or something like that, but sometimes it's more subtle than that. Jeff Miotke had Escape a few years ago, and the whole concept behind it was actually death, and it in a very respectful way. It was the year that Mr. Romano passed away, and he created a layout that basically was a row of Anubias, tying Anubius to Anubis, the god of death in Egypt's mythology. And he had that very simple idea and then did everything he could to maximize that story. In a similar way, Stephen Chong's layout last year that took fifth place in the IAPLC, he had the concept of a chasm, and he built his whole layout around how do I present a chasm in a fish tank. So it can be anything from a natural formation to a more abstract concept, but just having a clear story of what you want to present and working from there typically results in very unique aquascapes. And I think if you do look up the TAC aquascapes, you'll see a huge range of styles. Certain international teams tend to very much conform. Other ones you'll see more variation, and so far we're trending towards the side that is more creative and shows variation in the layouts that we produce.
Yeah, and I'm on the TAC Aquascape right now, the Instagram account, and I'll make sure I have that and the Lodge if people want to click on that Facebook group and if they're interested in joining. So I'll have those links in the show notes as well as the link to the mind-bending nano aquarium, the Aquascape article that featured your nano tank. But yeah, Stephen Chong, I believe it's called Butterfly Hideaway.
Yes.
Yeah, this thing is amazing. This just is unreal. It is absolutely unreal. It looks like you're zoomed out on this just cavernous jungle. Like it's so hard to describe, and I'm doing a terrible job at it. But yes, people, check out the Aquascapers Collective on the Instagram. What I love about this page is that there's a connection to each of these pictures. So it's kind of an aggregating Instagram page, right? Where, you've got pictures from various sources, but unlike the other aggregators out there that just kind of steal pictures and put them on their own account, there's a connection, right? These people are connected to the Aquascapers Collective, and to me that just makes it that much more special. It's like with Jimmy of Aquarium Co-op on his Instagram page. What's so special about that is that those are all his photos. It's pure fish porn. It's pure fish, amazing pictures, and fish porn. Gotta love using that term. But if you follow that, you're gonna get all those great pictures, and they're actually his, and they're not just like this. I've got 50,000 followers because all I do is rip off people's Instagram pictures and put them on my own, and I happen to get the snowball rolling, and people just keep following me. But
right.
Nonetheless, all that to say, people should follow this page because the photos, the aquascapes, picture of you and your new child, just super super awesome.
Yeah.
That's like there's an aquascape in the background that you're working on, but this awesome gorgeous work that your team is doing.
Well, thank you. Yeah, one of the things that brings the most enjoyment to me is, I have all these goals about I want to be a world-class aquascaper. I want to win, place winning scapes in international competitions. And those are all great. But really, it wouldn't be enjoyable if it wasn't for the community again. And one of the great things about the Aquascapers Collective is we celebrate each other's successes. So, last 2 years ago when I didn't rank that well, my good friend Marvin, who I consider my rival, and he's also in my local club, the Chicago Aquatic Plant Society. He placed really well in IAPLC. He ranked in the 40s. And in that morning when you wake up and the ranks come out, or you get the letter in the mail that's going to tell you where you placed, and you get to see where everybody else ranked, and also, and more importantly, everybody else's creations. It's like it's a great day. It's probably the most fun day of the year for me in terms of the hobby is waking up and seeing all these masterpieces that people created, and I find more enjoyment in that than in ranking well myself. So in the context of TAC, we just started that Instagram page, but just seeing everybody else here starting to produce these layouts that are breathtaking is it's a lot of fun. It really is.
Where do you see your inspiration primarily coming from when you do an aquascape?
It for me it's a long process. I start to think about it pretty early. I just finished my layout for the IAPLC this year, and I'm a month before that had already started thinking about what I was going to do for the next year, and typically it is coming up with that story. A lot from memories. A lot of it comes from memories. I grew up on 5 acres that had a lot of these giant oak trees, and I think my 2016 layout, that was the sort of the inspiration, where were these giant oak trees. That one can also be seen in the AGA contest. It ranked 164 in the IAPLC as well, and I have it on my Instagram account. But that's probably the quickest way to go see it. But yeah, a lot of it's from memories. It's from things that I see in nature. Sometimes it's honestly just an emotion too. Last year having my daughter was a very life-changing thing for me and a very joyous thing. And typically my layouts in the past had been kind of dark. My wife always says they look scary when I started to make them. And I made a really bright and colorful layout just to kind of celebrate the joy that I had been feeling in that season. So, and actually the title of that one was Amor Patrice, which means love of the Father in Latin. So it's kind of a little tribute to my daughter there. So really inspiration just comes from everywhere. From seeing other people's layouts too, you pick up ideas. So I draw it from a wide range of places.
No, I love it. And I think looking at your own Instagram page, which again will be linked in the show notes, you do see that some of your earlier photos on here, like kind of a darker, especially one where you've got what looks like, was that spiderwood kind of draped over Ceru stone that is kind of jagged and jutting up, like it's almost like, man, there's something creepy living there. I probably shouldn't go down that path, but it's it's beautiful and it's got greenery at the same time. So to me, it's got this nice balance to it. Again, everything is so subjective, but I'd be hard pressed for somebody to look at this and not think it was cool. Whether they think it's like, oh man, it's a little scary what's going on in Stephen King's head over there, but it's awesome though. This is great stuff.
Yeah, and I think too, each artist has their own conception of what nature is, and to me, it's not as idealized as I find some other people hold nature to be. I definitely see the brutal parts of nature. I grew up on a small farm, and you would see, a hawk come down and take a chicken and things like that. And there's definitely that sense of danger and brutality in nature, but also beauty. And so I think, some of that gets expressed through my work in terms of when I'm producing a layout. I tend to incorporate a lot of shadow, which actually is not a bad thing. Most compositions. Value is a very important thing, and you want to look at placing shadow and light to contrast each other. But in terms of a range, some of my layouts tend to be, on the verge of being too dark. That's one of the critiques I get a lot when I'm taking my photos for competition within the group. Most people will say, "Hey, you need to brighten this up a little bit," and I gotta try and adjust the lights and get a little bit lighter photo. But yeah, the inspiration, as long as you are coming up with your own story, I think even if you are heavily influenced by other people and other artists, it is going to be unique in the end.
What came first, your photography skills or your aquascaping?
Aquascape. I'm not a good photographer. I'm learning, and with great help from other people in the Aquascapers collective and my friend Marvin, my rival. He does help me take photos. So
I love this. How did Marvin get to be your rival? What happened?
So Marvin and I were early members of the Chicago Aquatic Plant Society, which is our local group here in Chicago, where we started 2014, 15. It was a smaller group, maybe, 10, 12 people, and now there's over 100 paid members, and our Facebook group has over 1,000 people in Illinois, all in this group. But it's a planted tank club, local club. Awesome people, and it hosts a wider range of interests in terms of if you just want to learn how to grow plants, if you just want to have even growing plants immersed in pots and things like that, or if you want to aquascape, it's a great place to learn.
So what did he do? Did he outbid you on an exotic plant or something? What happened here?
No, I think the first year I did the contest, there weren't too many people from the club in it, aside from myself and Balin. And then the next year, I was encouraging Marvin to enter, and he put together an awesome layout. He got a rank in that contest. And ever since then, we've just kind of enjoyed going to the live contests together and competing against each other and talking smack and stuff. But we go back.
I love it, man. That's awesome.
Yeah. He'll beat me in one contest, and then I'll beat him in the next one, and we'll go back and forth. So it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, you've got to have a healthy level of smack talking in any competition, and even in aquascaping. Like, I would love to have, if somebody could be a fly on the wall that maybe all they know is hockey or all they know is football, right? And they hear these two dudes talking smack about aquascaping and like plant selection and shadows and all that stuff. Like, I would just love to blow their mind with, oh yeah, check out this level of nerdy smack talking going on.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely an interesting art form, and when we're talking about it, sometimes you can tell like other people have no idea what we're going on about, but it's part of the fun, is having other people that share the same interest and are willing to put as much effort into it as you are. It's something that I really enjoy, and him and I being rivals has really made the experience more enjoyable, and I think has helped us, both of us. We push each other to get better. So,
So where did the fish come in all of this aquascaping and in your enjoyment of the hobby? Because for me, I'm kind of on the other end of the spectrum where I'm all about fish breeding and having a fish room with several species that I'm working with, and trying to figure out how to get a certain corridor to breed and all that fun stuff. So barrel bottom tanks, and I've got some planted crypts and substrate and a little clear Ziploc kind of round container. So plants for me are something to help with nitrites and all of the stuff that ammonia and just all the bad things that we don't want in our water that are basically doing the biological filtration for me, leveraging heavily on why am I drawing a name on the terrestrial plant that we shove into the water that, man, why am I drawing? I'm looking at it right now. It's like all over my fish room. Okay.
I don't grow any terrestrial plants.
Well, it's the one that you stick it to the, okay, I'm going to move on off of that, but it's going to come to me and I'm going to say, it's that. So
I know what you're talking about. Does it start with a P or something?
Pothos. Jeez Louise. Man,
Yes.
somebody's going to take away my fish nerd card if I can't even think of the name freaking Pothos. Okay, yeah, sticking Pothos in like every tank and just having it go from tank to tank to tank. So that's kind of my experience. And I do have a couple of, planted tanks that are actually in this room right now, my recording room, that I look at and I love. But like, I appreciate aquascaping from a distance because
Yeah.
I know there's just a whole skill set and a mindset that I think you need with aquascaping that I don't possess. And for me, it's more about the fish. And what I've said before also is that this hobby in general is so multifaceted that you can go down any number of rabbit holes and have pure enjoyment and never
Yes.
feel like you're missing out. But for you, though, where do the fish come in, and what has been your experience with fish? Do you do any kind of breeding projects? Where does like, I don't know, strain development come in? Does anybody do like does anybody work to try to get like a designer fish that nobody else has to get in their tank, which I know sounds incredibly far-fetched, but maybe we'll just
Oh,
break it
yeah.
down. Where do the fish come in for you?
Yeah, so a few things about fish. First of all, I don't think people necessarily know this, but in the IAPLC, which is the largest or most well-recognized international competition, most of the categories that you're judged on give you 10 points, but translated something like suitable habitat for fish and healthy fish category is worth 50 points. So it's extremely important, even in the realm of competition, and also just personally. And I know you asked me personally. I wouldn't enjoy an aquascape if it didn't have animals in it, and I spent a lot of time thinking about what is it specifically about aquascaping that draws me to it over fish breeding or shrimp keeping or collecting coral or things like that. I think to me the thing about aquascaping, the aspect that's so appealing is that instead of having a rare plant or a rare coral or a rare fish, your whole the aquascape is the rarity. That when you come into somebody's house and you see a mountain range in their living room that's underwater, that's the rare thing. And it does take work, just like breeding fish or creating a new designer strain of shrimp or whatever it is. So I think there are some similarities there. But for me personally, I spend a lot of time thinking about what fish will best fit my story that I'm creating. So I do spend a lot of time trying to select the perfect fish for the layout. And you will see most of the top aquascapers usually, get that point nailed down. I'm still working on it, and I'm not, given my history of being only 5 years in the hobby, I'm not haven't quite perfected which fish are most suitable for which aquarium. But Mr. Fukada, who is, most people would admit that he is the best competitive aquascaper in the world right now. There's a few people who can test him with consistency, but he's won the IAPLC 2 years in a row. He used some African moon tetras, I believe, last year, which I don't know how uncommon those are, but it's certainly something I'd never seen in an aquascape before. And every year he seems to kind of pick out a new fish that's like, oh, no one has ever thought to use that one in a contest, and then he ranks really high. Some aquascapers will build their whole story around the fish. Masashi Ono, he's another member of the Tokyo Aquascapers Union. I believe he typically does that. He focuses on the fish, and then will create an aquascape that best suits that. And he's consistently ranking in the top ranks of these competitions as well. So it is a very important thing. I think sometimes people think that we don't care, that aquascapers don't care about their animals or don't care about their fish selection or things like that. Certainly, we're not as into it as the people who are breeding the fish and coming up with new strains. It's a different focus, but it is also very important to us.
Mm-hmm. And I guess for just to have this discussion around the fish selection. So it's more than just the color, right? There's color, there's shape, do they school or do they shoal? Do they
Yes.
Are they inactive? Are they active? And all of those components together, how does that go with my aquascape? Or vice versa, how am I going to build an aquascape around that behavior?
Yes. Yeah. Mr. Fukada, again from Japan, in 2016, he won the IAPLC with a work called The Mighty Cave. If you type in Mighty Cave Aquascape, it should be the first one that pops up. And he used, he used glass cats.
He used glass cats?
Yeah,
I would never pick a glass cat for an aquascape. Like in my head, that would not pop up as like, oh yeah, throw some glass cats in there. That's gonna look awesome.
Yeah, and a lot of the judges were commenting how this is a perfect layout for them because it's this cave. There's lots of areas where the heavy shadow is provided, and I think that's one that really stands out in my mind as an awesome fish selection.
Oh, okay. So this looks like a kind of a wind carved canyon.
Yep.
Yeah, and there's glass cats in there.
Yeah, I mean, certainly every year there's layouts that have this, the neon tetras and stuff, but a lot of the top layouters really do actually will change it up quite a bit with what fish they use.
Yeah, because I mean, glass cat, very, very common in a retail store here in the USA.
Yep.
African moon tetra, I've never even seen that on the distributor list for Aquarium Co-op to even buy. So I'm sure we could probably get them, but at least our most common distributor, I've never seen African moon tetra on there. And that's a cool looking fish.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Masashi Ono, another one that was a great aquascape centered around a fish. Masashi Ono had a layout in 2017 that was centered around, I'm blanking on the name. It's the wild betta that has the really large mouth.
Wild betta, really large mouth. Is it? Jeez.
They're orange. They're like orange and black.
Does it also go by Brunei Beauty? It's
yes.
We've had a couple of them. They can be super aggressive, super boisterous.
Yes. So actually, the layout, the name of his layout is the Garden of Brunei Beauty.
Oh, nice.
Masashi.
There we go.
Yeah.
So at least I got the common name in there.
Yeah. That layout as well. He had a pair of those bettas, and he centered the whole aquascape around it. And it's a beautiful, beautiful layout. Much in some aspects simpler than some of the things that you imagine, but also when you look at it and you realize what actually went into it, it's an absolute masterpiece. So I think, aquascaping is often stereotyped as, just mountains and forests and moss. And while that does, you will see plenty of layouts like that, if you really go and look at the IAPLC or the AJA contests and you take some time and go through it, you'll see that there are all forms of expression within the nature aquarium well represented in these contests. And that's one of the great things is there is good variety to kind of aspire to or draw inspiration from or just appreciate.
Yeah, and that's going to be the betta macrostoma is the Brunei Beauty, and that is it's a sizable fish too. Like if you're used to betta splendens a lot, and then all of a sudden you see some of these wild bettas, it's like, man, that betta macrostoma, that sucker's like 3 inches, 3.5 inches. Like they can get pretty long, and you're already used to bettas being fairly aggressive, but those ones are definitely. They're definitely animated, and they can get ornery. Even in the bag, those suckers were very, very active. But that is a super, super awesome fish. And when we were getting them in, we'd get them in, we'd quarantine them, and then the next day they'd be when they were available for sale, they'd be gone because they were, there's just such an awesome fish.
Yeah, they're absolutely beautiful. Someday I'd like to give them a shot, but I don't think I'm quite prepared for it yet. I'm very much at the stage right now where I'm actively avoiding distractions because my primary goal is to improve as an aquascaper and to I'm very self-critical of my layouts, and I go through, even I'll set one up and I'll kind of like it, and then the next day I'll hate it and I'll be changing things, and I kind of go through that cycle, and it does push me, but every once in a while I am tempted to like, start a shrimp colony or, oh, I'm going to set up a biotope for this really cool fish. And I have to sort of reel myself back in and take a look and say, realistically, what do I have time for? And what am I going to enjoy most right now? And I think later, who knows, maybe 2 years from now, my focus might change. But right now, I'm intentionally staying super focused on the thing that I've decided that I enjoy most at this time in the hobby. But that doesn't mean I don't appreciate the other aspects. I mean, I love going to see people's reef tanks or people's fish rooms. I think part of the beautiful thing is there is a multitude of ways to express yourself and not necessarily just express yourself, but to interact with nature through the aquarium hobby. Whether that is through the animals primarily, or through creating a planted layout, or through the horticulture aspect, or you name it. There's so many different ways that you can really delve in and learn something and appreciate nature and share that with other people.
Do you know what the best thing about a reef tank is?
I don't.
You can start over and do a planted tank.
Yes.
So tell that to all your buddies with reef tanks.
I will.
Be like, look at this thing. Look what I can make. Look at your reef tank. That's boring, man. With your wave maker and your one clownfish. Get this out of here. Come on. Look at this stuff I'm making.
Yeah, whenever I just think, oh man, I want to start a reef tank, I just start to put together a budget for it, and then I throw it out halfway through. Yeah, man, just go back to my planted tanks.
I feel like the salt creep and just all of that. I don't know. Like there's just so much about it. I know. I give saltwater people such a hard time, but it's just so hard when you see some of these, like Aquascapers Collective, your guys' Instagram page. You see AGA tanks, you see ADA tanks, you see what people all across the world are producing with freshwater, and that scale and that level of beauty. It's just incredible.
And one thing that we really hope to do, both through the Chicago Aquatic Plant Society and the Aquascapers Collective in their own way, we're trying to give people a place where they can achieve those goals. Because I understand 5 years ago I looked at a world-class aquascape and I said, man, I really, really want to do that, but I can't ever see myself. Where do I start? I got to learn all this stuff. I've never grown a plant in my life. I've never kept a fish tank in my life. And it seems so unattainable. And I'm certainly not, I'm a student at this point. I'm learning, and I have a long way to go. But I had to stop and just look last year, and it's like, man, I placed third in the international contest, in the AGA contest, and that was something that 5 years ago I didn't think possible. And it has only been possible through, like I said, the community with the Chicago Aquatic Plant Society, with the people I met in tech, and people sharing what they know and talking about these ideas back and forth, being open about how do we improve together. So one thing that we hope to provide people is that sense that, hey, even if I've never done this before, if I want to produce a world-class aquascape, I can do it. It's achievable. It's open to me. So that's kind of, in a sense, I think both the ultimate goal of TAC and the Chicago Aquatic Plant Society.
Mm-hmm. Well, John, you are super humble, man. Just a few years into this, and you're producing some amazing aquascapes, and you and I will stay connected, and I'm sure that I'm going to see your name up in lights, winning awards, and I mean the stuff that you're doing, the stuff that everybody in your group is doing is just phenomenal. I think it's fantastic, and anybody listening to this that even if your focus is on plants, or it's on flower horns, or it's on whatever part of the hobby you're in, you've got to follow John, you've got to follow the Aquascapers Collective and just be plugged into their social media and see just the awesome, cool stuff that you guys are producing, and then have this connection to it. Like, oh man, I listened to that guy on the podcast. Like, I'm actually seeing the work that he's doing, and it's pretty sweet. It's awesome. Like, and maybe you get inspired and you join the Aquascapers Collective on Facebook, and you get into the lodge, and exactly like John's saying, you just get plugged into this community. You learn, you get encouraged, and you start producing some really cool stuff that is going to look way better than a reef tank.
Yes, exactly.
Got to bring it back. Got to bring it back home.
Yeah.
Well, John, I heard, I've had you for about an hour now. This has been a fantastic interview. Like myself, you are, you've got a young family. I heard your baby in the background crying. So
Sorry about that.
No, dude, don't even worry about it at all. We are keeping this into the episode because you're balancing a full professional career with this incredible dedication to aquascaping, and you're being a dad. Right, you're being a dad and a husband. So I want to be respectful of your time and just say thank you so much, and hope to have you on again.
Thank you. I really enjoyed it. I'll look forward to talking to you soon.